2, 1. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Adwicta.
This is Merps. Welcome to Lightforge 200.
200!
I know. We are 2 years, almost to the exact day. Not actually. But we're 2 years after Lightforge 100 and basically 4 years after the very first Lightforge.
Mhm.
So we've made it a long way. The arena has changed quite a lot since episode 100, and it's changed quite a lot since the very first episode. I don't think we have changed a lot. Right before this, I was watching Lightforge episode 100. I was like, wow, we look pretty similar. And I think at our age, that's the best that we can ask for.
Oh, I got my haircut today. So I moved to Charlotte from New York, and I've been trying to find random Asian places. So we went to dim sum at like one of the 2 dim sum places in Charlotte, and it is like literally post-apocalyptic, like Fallout levels of like dystopian like lot. Just potholes everywhere. It looks like it's after an earthquake. It's like a mall kind of deal that maybe has like 20 units, but only like 6 are like filled with stuff. The rest are like storage units or whatever. There's bums that have taken over half of the mall. And anyway, I ended up getting a haircut there afterwards. The dim sum was actually decent. It was just surprising, but it's a decent spot. I forgot what it was called. It's like Dragon Cafe or Dragon Corner or something. But I got a haircut afterwards, and the guy cutting my hair was like, "Oh, I'm gonna give you a young man's cut. I think your hair normally it looks, it's classic and all that, but you should look more younger. I'm gonna do that for you." And I'm like, "All right, sure." Most of the way through the haircut, he's like, "Oh, by the way, how old are you? 25, 26?" And I'm like, I'm 33. And he's like, "Oh, then I've given you a very young man's haircut."
Nice.
So yeah,
there you go. It's that. I was gonna say it's that Justin Bieber cut, but dude, Justin Bieber's old now.
Justin
Which means
Bieber
we
is
are
old.
real old.
Uh,
Oh God. Well, anyways, look.
but yeah, we've definitely aged more the first 2 years than the last 2 years. If you're gonna break this down, like if you go to Lightforge 1 on our YouTube, we look very different than we look now. I think, like noticeably so. But Lightforge 100 to now, it's about the same.
It's about the same. All right. Anyways, we look about the same, but there have been so many changes between Lightforge 100 and this episode, much more so than the first Lightforge to 100. Right? If you remember, during that time span, Blizzard had a very hands-off, laissez-faire approach to the arena, where all they did was just update the cards and it was like, here you go, you guys play with it. And then ever since about a year and a half ago, they have just been very hands-on, in fact, taking up more and more and more responsibilities to the point where right now they are responsible for micro adjust. They're responsible for exactly which cards are in the arena. They update they pick which cards to update, sort of like yay or nay, whenever they want. We have leaderboards now, and it's one of those things where the game just, like the skeleton is there, but it's been dressed up and slathered with makeup and just been tossed around, and it's very different now. It's very, very different, and we're gonna keep on going down this road unless Blizzard just like completely ditches arena. So when we get to Lightforge 300, I'm sure it'll look even more different, significantly so.
Yeah, we were 100 Lightforges ago. We were in standard arena, and that was kind of the new thing. And they've just started like micro adjusts, and things are moving. And now we're out of that. Now micro adjusts are 100% of everything. We're in a wild rotation system that is not standard, not wild, kind of somewhere in between, and subject to every adjustments every 2 months. Blizzard itself, not just in the arena, has done stuff like buffing cards, so it's It's very different. Now, like before, a lot of times it's just like it's a lot of what is the meta right now? Oh, that's because Angoro's doing this, or that's because this latest set is doing this. Now, especially in the last like 3 months, like at least half of it is like, oh, that's what Blizzard has decided to do with either buckets or miss buckets, micro adjust or lack of micro adjust, which sets they decide to put into this particular wild rotation meta. And then the other half is like, oh, Rise of Shadows, right? Where they still can't do much about it. Although between buckets and micro adjust, they could do some things about it.
Yeah, it's Blizzard's game, and you are playing in it. Which,
Mm-hmm.
at its very basic level, is like, yeah, of course, this is Blizzard's game, and you're playing it. But what I mean is that the creation of the meta, right? Uh, it used to be more so in your hands, the player's
Mm-hmm.
hands. And now it is much more so in Blizzard's hands. As I say this, I am checking HS replay right now, and right now Paladin has a 53% win rate, and then it slowly cascades down, pretty gradual, and then we have Warrior at 38.7% win rate. So Blizzard has, through its micro adjustments, bucketing, offering rates, etc., basically said Warrior is going to suck. Now,
Now, to be fair, if Blizzard has not done anything, Warrior would still suck.
Warrior would still suck, right? But through all of the buttons and levers that they have pulled, they have ensured that
Mm-hmm.
that warriors suck. And part of warrior sucking is also because other classes are good. So when Blizzard makes like Paladin good, right? Or when it makes Mage good, it inadvertently, or not inadvertently, but it
It's
obviously
a
makes
the
Warrior bad.
expected side effect, right?
Yeah, that's the expected side effect. It's like if one class gets better, the others kind of have to get a little bit worse.
Yeah, because it's all
um,
relative. It's a 1v1 game. Someone wins, someone
it,
has to lose.
Exactly. Now, in previous metas, and we've seen this, where, for example, way back when, um, for example, if Hunter was not good, right? Like Pioneers, for example, like Shady Bunny, or Collins, or someone like Hafu with Shaman way back when,
Mm.
they would say, "Hey, you guys are kind of wrong about this because my own personal win rate with it is much higher." You could still see a little bit of that. So, I wouldn't be too surprised if someone was like, by the way, Druid, which is like number 4, that's actually like the best class right now.
I mean, you
And
could
for
definitely still do it, even with the
yeah,
microdust. It doesn't change that kind of effect, right? Like it's just
yeah,
you're operating on a different baseline now. Your original baseline was all cards offered based on whatever like their rarity is or whatever other rules that Blizzard had in it. Now you've added like Blizzard thinks that you should get these cards in these selection choice pools, and then you can work with that. And sometimes it really works in a class's favor. Like Druid for the entirety of the prior meta, of the Rise of Shadows meta, the last 2 months, was always underrated. From the very beginning, when Druid had like a, I don't know, like a 43, 44% win rate, and they were, it's a very good class at that point. Sure, it was nowhere near as good as Rogue, which was dominating the meta and making everyone else look kind of like third class citizens. But of the
mhm,
third class citizens, Druid was at the top with Warlock and all that. It just had win rates as if it were at the bottom. And then they made an adjustment, and Druid looked a little better, but not dominant. And then they made another adjustment, and then Druid, like everyone started picking up on this whole like, oh yeah, just make a token Druid. It's not that hard. And at that point, Druid win rates really took off. But from the very beginning, Druid was doing really good. And I had made a lot of like comments and posts, and we had put videos up like about how to do druids, so you could still do it. But at that point, the argument stops being like the good old days when it's like this is how you do druid. You take these resources that they're giving you and you do this, and it starts being like, well, you take these particular kind of like you're basically trying to arbitrage for Blizzard's misvaluations rather than just trying to use the best cards for the class to build an archetype, right? You're now looking at like which ones are misbucketed, which cards happen to be offered a lot more. If they're similar types of cards, you can get a certain kind of consistency, and the analysis goes a lot deeper, but not in the direction of the game. It goes a lot deeper into the direction of what has Blizzard done and what are they wrong about. So once you know what Blizzard's done and you know what Blizzard's wrong about, or what they just kind of, or what people are wrong about, I guess, and Blizzard's just listening to average players, then you figure out what you can do with the class. And so you can still do that. It just takes a lot more, and it feels a lot less organic. And ultimately, you're not saying, "Oh, this class is actually better than everyone says." You're saying, "Oh, Blizzard messed up here, and so we're gonna abuse it."
Yeah, you're not if this is like if arena is a test, it's less about the substance of the exam and more about you figuring out the tendencies
Yes.
of the test makers.
Which, to be fair, is the way you should take all tests.
It is, but this is not a test because there's fun involved, and like, all right, look, maybe bad analogy because tests aren't really fun, but if I were to, take tests for fun, I'd much rather, just test myself, challenge myself, right? See how much knowledge I have, rather than just trying to be like, all right, so this month the test makers really like analogy questions, right? And actually, like, they really like analogy questions with Latin roots. That's up
And
this
on
month.
top of that, they're wrong about all Latin roots involving sleep. So where everybody
Yes.
would pick the right answer, that would actually be wrong. So now we're going to pick the wrong answer, but only if it involves the roots that have to do with sleep.
Yes, definitely.
That's the game we're playing now.
Right. And it's like, oh, okay. So gotta study like my geometry this month is like calculus, that's next month. Don't need to know that. It's like as long as I'm taking the test this month, it's geometry.
And remember, all geometric rules that apply to triangles now apply to hexagons and vice versa because Blizzard swapped the two.
That's true. That's very true. And they used to not do circles because they thought circles were too hard. But on this exam, circles are coming back.
They're back. Yeah, you got to learn your circles
again.
again.
Circles are back, Okay, anyways. So that's kind of where we are with the meta. I watched Lightforge 100, and what we did was we looked forward to what we expect for the next, like, future of Hearthstone Arena, right? We did one of those.
God,
so
what do we say?
yeah, well, I didn't watch that closely. Come on. I think I remember it was mostly just like, well, hoping like we have a more of a competitive atmosphere. Ha ha ha.
Oh, that's funny.
To be fair, since that time, we have had
a period
from Blizzard. We had Twitch and Frodan work very hard to get the community involved in the Twitch Rivals event, which you won, right? So that was one of those things where it was kind of cool. I mean, that was like the only sort of big taste of competition that the arena community has had. And I remember the first time, or the last time when we did this, Frodan sort of hinted that it wouldn't be the only time. So hopefully we'll have another one of those in the future. But what's your prediction, man? What do you think is going to happen between now and Lightforge 300?
300, 2 years from now. Oh, God. I think when, let's say it was Lightforge 0, right? Like Lightforge 1.
Sure.
I felt pretty confident about the direction Blizzard was going. By Lightforge 100, I was a little less sure because, I have experience now with what Blizzard actually did over the course of those 2 years. And by this point, with the backwardsness that's been happening recently, I just don't know. I've given up the illusion that I have the ability to predict what Blizzard is going to do. You show me a bunch of cards in a card pool, I'll tell you what the meta is going to be when you give me the offering rates, right? I'll tell you how good a card is going to be overall. I'll say which ones are valued what. Like, that's all normal stuff. Some of it's math, some of it's well, I mean, it's all math, but some of it is more complicated, some of it is simpler. But when it comes to predicting what Blizzard will do, that's voodoo. And my voodoo is not that good. I've tried, and I have not succeeded, and so I'm not even gonna try here. I will say I don't think Hearthstone's going to die. I think Hearthstone's going to be around, and it will be, if like right now, I don't know how many people play Hearthstone, but it's got to be like still a ton, right? Like I don't know how many people they've lost in the last 2 years, and people are making out like, oh my god, Hearthstone is like in a death spiral. Well, let's say Hearthstone lost like 70% of its player base. It's still like the largest game around. I think MTG, at least MTGA Twitch wise, may be getting close. But yeah, like I don't think Hearthstone's really going anywhere. I think there's probably going to be more challengers coming than there were 2 years ago. MTGA's here. Artifact did not really quite make the splash it was supposed to, but Artifact's not dead. The developers are kind of rebooting it in the process of doing something like that. There's other TCGs coming out, so maybe Hearthstone gets an even smaller share of the pie, but it's not going away. And that's the only prediction I can make, because that's not really something Blizzard can do unless they so totally mess up, right? Like that's I hear some comments here or there that maybe like makes me think like a quarter of the population who play Hearthstone thinks Hearthstone's actually not going to be around in 2 years, and I just don't think that there's really much chance of that happening.
I agree. One of the things that uh, it's going to take a lot for another card game to come and dethrone Hearthstone. Number one, because Hearthstone just like it's pumped a lot of money into it, so it looks very polished,
Yeah.
right? Like we talked about this, to polish the sort of the feel of it, right? All of these small things that you don't really notice. That's a lot of money, a ton of money, all the voice acting and everything. Number two, it's like everyone has already sank money into Hearthstone, so it's sort of like it's hard for you to completely ditch it. This isn't like if you were playing paper Magic and
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to transition to like paper Pokemon cards, you could
Right.
just sell your Magic
Or
cards
even
and play Pokemon.
MTGO.
Yeah, exactly, right. So you could just sell them. But here you're just like, geez, well, what am I gonna do? It's like I can dust my cards to make new cards, and that was very purposeful. But so it's going to be pretty hard. And all of these other card games that are coming out, they try to differentiate themselves, right? And you kind of have to. And
Mm-hmm.
when they say differentiation or when they think differentiation, a lot of it comes down to it's like more complexity, more choices,
Right.
where we know that it's like complexity and choices aren't always good, right? People
Mm-hmm.
don't always enjoy this. It's part of the reason why Artifact sank. Like
Yeah.
it was so bad because I think I used this analogy before. I was looking at, I was just like, what the heck is this? Like, I couldn't understand any of it. It was way too complex. And viewing it was like you trying to read a book and someone else was flipping the pages, right? Like, it was just so hectic. It was just terrible. So, yeah, complexity does not always make for success. You could make the most complex game in the world. And I think you guys could think about it right now. It's like, that would not be fun at all, right? So Hearthstone has definitely hit like a sweet spot there.
And Hearthstone is
So
so like simple, it's hard to get simpler. Like it's
it is
hard to
hard to get simpler.
undercut Hearthstone in its simplicity. And that is
Yeah,
so that's not really like space that people have the ability to operate under. So every game that comes out has to be a bit more complicated than Hearthstone, kind of by default. Because Hearthstone
right.
I don't know how much less complicated you can get than classic Hearthstone and still have a game that's not like solvable, right? Um
Yeah, exactly.
so yeah, like we did I think like you talk about Lightforge 100. I think we reviewed Shadowverse at that time, and we were all pretty like we liked like I really liked Shadowverse back then. It was a lot of new classes, new ideas that were things that weren't existing in Hearthstone. It was pretty easy to pick up, ran very smoothly, like had a lot of polish to it. And I revisited it earlier this year, and it was just not as good of an experience. Not that I think it would be a bad experience if I had kept up with Shadowverse all these years, but jumping back in, it was so hard because they had gotten so complicated because every card was generating other cards that had different names, that had different things, and it was like a lot of like reading rule books and stuff. And so you have a lot of games that like the complexity, I guess, what do you call that, ramp or creep, the complexity creep is real, and Hearthstone has suffered a little from it. The game's definitely much more complex now than it used to be, and not always for the better. But compared to some of the other stuff out there, it's handling it in true Hearthstone philosophy, right? Keeping it as simple as possible. And because they can't develop simpler, they have to develop more complexity, but they're still keeping that complexity as in like as under control as they can, right? Like Twin Spell, that's so basic, right? Like other card games start with Twin Spell. Hearthstone gets to it like 4 or 5 years later, right?
Definitely. So I'm gonna follow up on your prediction, and say I not only agree, but I think strongly actually. I think Hearthstone will become even stronger, and I will make a further prediction about Arena in a second. But I want to say why. Whenever you make a game right now, unless it is a single player game, and even single player games, I think they keep this in mind, right? Unless it is a strictly single player sort of like indie game, right? Like you know, uh, what was the name of that? Like that game that you really like, Braid, right?
That was
Yeah,
one of the best games ever made.
right. Unless it's one of those sort of like projects, I think developers are creating games much more so with Twitch and streaming and just social media in mind, right? You kind of have
Mm-hmm.
to. And I think Blizzard, like if you guys know the history of Hearthstone, you guys should know that when it came out, Blizzard wasn't expecting this much success, and when they initially released it, it was like not polished. Like a lot of things about it were polished, right? Like the voice acting, the animations, it looked really good, right? But they weren't expecting that much success. So really, like the game's been out for 5 years, almost, but they released it in a form in which it just wasn't really that ready. So, um, with Hearthstone, essentially, the advantages that you have now, like at this point, are that it is really friendly for Twitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you watch, like if you were to watch Shadowverse, if you were to watch another card game, and this is why like Artifact failed. Like they had that stream, and then people watched it, and they're like, "Hell no, we're not playing this game." That was my reaction.
Well, my
Right? I was
reaction
like,
is hell no, I'm not watching this game because I'm not gonna understand it because I had just
"Well,
watched an hour and I did not understand it.
that too." And like a month afterwards, I think on Twitch, they had like 50 people watching Artifact or something. But so look, games are more and more so catering and trying to capture the Twitch slash YouTube market, right? And whatever else viewing, sort of like platform is going to come out here. And I think that's where Hearthstone is extraordinarily strong because of its presentation, its popular and friendly IP, right? It's a characters that character that everyone sort of like loves. And it's ease of access, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
ease of access, so it looks really good. And I see Hearthstone these days recognizing this and capitalizing. It's why they have the grandmasters, right? Once they sort of implemented the grandmaster system, now on a weekly basis, you get to see these people kind of battle each other. You see Firebat, right? You see Colento, you see RDU, you see all of these players that go up against each other, and this creates rivalries. This creates stories. Essentially, they saw what they had with the Overwatch League, and they're like, "Wow, this is really good for the longevity of Overwatch. We need something like this for Hearthstone." I think that's what they were thinking. So,
And that's what everyone was saying before the game even came out.
right, it's like, okay, look, in order for your game to be successful, you need content creators and people associated with the game to be excited about the game
Hmm.
and elevate the game, right? It's like Fortnite was really popular and it made Ninja. You can say that. But then Ninja also
Yeah.
elevated Fortnite
Hmm.
to an extreme level, right? It's like this synergistic relationship. It's like, yeah, obviously, Firebat would not be as popular as he is if there wasn't Hearthstone. Like, he was world champion. But then it's like, you gotta maximize the opportunity to give someone like Firebat like the opportunity to elevate your game even more, right? So good games do that. And I think Blizzard is finally understanding that sort of relationship. It's like, okay, we need to give people tools to elevate themselves within the game and also elevate our game as a result of that. So I think we're going to see more of that from Hearthstone, first in constructed, and then I think it will be brought into the arena as well. They tabled tournament mode because they said, well, it's not a priority for us. This is like last year. And I think eventually it kind of has to come out because this is something that is missing. And this is going to be something in which once they come out, it is so easy for content creators to create these stories, create these rivalries, and elevate the game, right? It's like, who doesn't want to see a weekly tournament? You know, Blizzard doesn't have to do any of that. Like, let's say, Dreads every wants to sort of organize a weekly tournament, right? It'll be good for his stream, it'll be good for the arena community, and everyone watching. It's like, oh, hey, by the way, there is also like within Dread's exclusive tournament, like within the let's say 12 slots or whatever, the last four slots are going to go to it's like
Mm.
high ranking members of the leaderboard in the past month, right? Something like that. So we can start with that, and then Twitch rivals can pick it up even more. Maybe Blizzard will pick it up even more. But I think because of the way that I see the industry trending, games can't have to be really good games, can't have to be really fun games. They have to be games that, number one, give their content creators tools to elevate the game even more. And number two, it has to be a visually like appealing game for Twitch or YouTube. And I'm looking at Hearthstone and I'm like, all right, Hearthstone is going in the direction of one. I think they finally realized that. Please, Blizzard, don't prove me wrong. And number two, I'm like, it is very good looking. It's very easily accessible. And this is something that Blizzard has always been good at. This is why Overwatch League, you know, even though it is a chaotic first person shooter with all of these things, it's like when I watch that versus, you watching another FPS, it's like it's clean, right? It's smooth. The color coding of Overwatch and the easy to understand ability. Like you look at Hanzo and you're just like, okay, this guy shoots arrows. He's probably like fairly mobile. Like you immediately understand, right? You look at Bastion, you're just like, okay, he probably has a decent amount of health, and he's like just a huge gun, so he can probably output a lot of damage. These are things you instinctively understand and you get in Hearthstone as well. I've been ranting a lot about this. As you can tell, I thought about this. I came prepared for Lightforge number 200. Also, the 2 month break, I thought about this a lot. But that is my hope, guys. All right, that is my hope. Blizzard, please don't prove me wrong. I think you can do it. I will be anxiously awaiting tournament mode and to crush everyone who thinks they have a chance.
So I'm thinking that's for Lightforge 400 and not 300 because of the pace that Blizzard moves. I don't disagree with you. I'm just questioning the timeline that we're doing here after Blizzard has scrapped tournament mode for a little
Do
bit
you
to
agree with my
retool.
sort of analysis of how the industry is trending?
I do. I think that's
Right?
exactly like you have to like the industry is trying it needs to go in this direction. Blizzard has done a very good job of going this direction, especially with Overwatch. But you need to break down the difference between being a viewer, being a player, being like someone who has the potential to be on a pro or semi-pro team, and the actual like pro tour, the people look up, the superstars, right, and the entertainers. You have to get all of them, and you have to put them on a vaguely similar like connectivity platform so that they can all in a very real time and a very consistent basis like interact with each other, because that's something that the platform of esports or video games or whatever you want to call it can do that traditional sports, that traditional forms of entertainment cannot do. And like it's interactive media, right? Like it can do anything. So
Right.
we're finally getting
It's
to the point where people have done this, and the communities are big enough, and the people are famous enough, and the money is, I guess the money's always kind of been there in spurts, but there's a bigger wave of money coming in now, and it's all like kind of coming together. So yeah, give it another year, another 2 years, maybe 4 years, and it's going to come together on all the big games. There's going to be a what do you call it, like a convergence of which games matter and which games don't matter. In the same way, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, there was a convergence of which sports mattered and which sports don't matter. And it may not be all the same ones in all the same places, but there's going to be big ones. Like, you're going to have like the basketball, the soccer of video games, and they're going to have some amount of longevity in a way that most video games have not had. So yeah, I think it's getting there, and I think there will be a card game that dominates in that way. And I think Hearthstone or Hearthstone 2.0, or just, I mean, they're probably not even going to call it Hearthstone 2.0. They're just going to upgrade the engine and everything at some point. But yeah, it's a good candidate for it.
Yeah. So look, that's where I think they're going. When Hearthstone announced this Grandmasters thing, I immediately, well, first of all, I was confused because whenever they write something out, it's not super clear. But when I saw it sort of play out, and the viewer numbers are like, they're okay right now.
They're decent.
But yeah,
I thought they would be lower.
I thought they'd be lower too. But like, as you sort of build momentum, and then as you build these storylines, right? I'm looking at what Hearthstone is doing. I'm just like, okay, finally, you understand. It's like you're giving players a chance to create more interest, right? To just create more storylines, to create more interest in your product. It's just like, it's such a shame, right? Like when I see for example, like you see Pavel winning, you see Firebat winning, you see Osaka winning, and really after that, it's like you're on your own. And Firebat has done a great job of streaming, sort of doing Omni Slash, of just keeping up with the competitive scene, keeping himself very relevant, right? But he had to try really hard to do that. Blizzard doesn't really throw you a bone. And with someone like Pavel and Osaka, it's sort of like, yeah, they can just, enter tournaments again. And the old system was just really archaic and hard to understand. I could not understand it even after reading it. I'm like, I don't understand this point system and everything. So Blizzard did a really bad job of being like, okay, well, you just won all this money, and now like you don't really have an easy opportunity to continue your streak and get like build up of all of this momentum, which I'm just like, dude, like this is gaming in, at that time it was like 2017. It's like, this is gaming in 2017. Now it's 2019. This is not how you approach the game. Like, your game itself is very polished, right? But you are throwing like nothing to your champions and to all of these players, which are really, really good. And all of the intrigue and all of that has to be, fan made, right? It's like, but now finally we get to see Strife Crow, Colento, and all of these players. And for me, someone who hasn't really followed construction, I'm just like, geez, where has Colento been? Where has Strife Crow been? I'm like, I'm pretty sure they haven't gone anywhere. They just didn't have that much opportunity because Blizzard doesn't give them any opportunity. And now finally I'm like, oh, I see Strife Crow like once every week. Yeah, he's still really good. I see Colento once every week. Yeah, he's still really freaking good. But I shouldn't have had to do that. Between 2019 and 2016, I just sort of forgot about Colento, and that shouldn't have been a thing, right? Like someone as big and as successful as Colento. So anyways, happy where it's at, and I think Blizzard will continue going down this direction.
Okay, so pulling it back to Arena.
Yeah.
Rather than the constructed pro
well, that's
scene.
The only example I had, right?
Yeah,
that's the only example.
I mean, and the bigger question is, what's Blizzard going to do in the Arena, right? Because it's all well and good that Blizzard understands how to make an esport. Well, Blizzard understood how to like make a competitive format from the get-go, right? and they put it in constructed, and they did it in arena, and they still don't really have it in arena, and it's 5 years later. So let's say Blizzard finally figured out a way to make an exciting esport instead of like this weird cobbled together esport thing with a decent prize at the end of the year, but no clear direction during the year. And let's say they finally get this right, and this is good. What's to say they don't, what's to say any of this has any impact on the arena, right? That still has to be a call that someone up there makes, and they have been pretty consistent about not making that call in the last few months with arena going away from standard. I feel like we're farther from that call than we were 2 years ago.
I agree with the mechanics, right? I would say the mechanics, yes, but with this, with these mechanics, it's not like it's set in stone, right?
Right.
And because
they could keep changing it, but it just shows that their current direction is not. It's not like they're pushing arena towards like some kind of let's iron out the wrinkles. Let's figure out like what's making this a good skill based like format. Let's figure out what limited players want. They're not doing any of that. They're going with let's see what we can get people in the arena. What's exciting? What's all the other stuff that is definitely important to an esport. But when it comes to both skill expression and just general organization, it's been like you guys see what's happened in the last 2 and something months. It's been pretty big of a failure, I think. And direction wise, it's not going towards where constructed is. It was going like a bit towards that, and then it took a sharp turn in April with the announcement of the wild rotation, and it's going to be its own thing now. That's not to say this can't end up being in some ways competitive or supported as an esport, but I think it's going away from that because Blizzard pours a ton of resources into balancing constructed and balancing the standard meta, and they don't really pour that many resources into balancing anything else. So if you don't have a balance in whatever thing, you're going to struggle to get a legitimate esport in it. If anything, it'll just expose how bad your system is. And you don't want that. So you're going to have to get your system right first. So I think what they've done with Arena is blown it up, and they're in the process of putting it back together. And if we're looking at a potential limited format esport, whether it's Arena or something else, as the end goal, that looks really far away to me. That doesn't look like Lightforge 300 to me. That looks like maybe Lightforge 400, probably Lightforge 500 if it ever happens. Like, and each 100, by the way, is 2 years. Like, that's how far away that looks to me after this. If you had asked me this question like 3 months ago, I would have said, maybe by Lightforge 300. Like, questionable. But now it's like, definitely not.
I think all they have to do is sort of, whenever they come out with tournament mode, I think everything will be on the fast track. Because once they do that, I think there will immediately be a lot of interest and intrigue into it. Because I think, look, there's a reason why limited format in MTG is extremely, extremely popular, right? It's just a popular format. Now, with Hearthstone, it's just because it's not really a limited format. Well, first of all, you don't crack open packs, which I think is part of the appeal of MTG. But also, it's like you can't really choose who you play with, right? And you can't play in the way that you want to play. You have to play in this weird anonymous way that Blizzard forces you to, which takes away a lot of the fun of it. Like, you want to play with your friends, you want to see like who's better, and all you can do is like go and play this anonymous.
It's very efficient but impersonal.
Very impersonal.
Yeah,
right? Very
and that's why I like it, right? Like, I like the efficiency of Arena. I like the impersonalness of Arena. Like, that's right up my alley. But if you're building something like, and I really, 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 really like it, you're probably doing something wrong. So
that's the ultimate test. It's like, oh, I made this feature for a game. Who likes it? Addict is like, I love it. It's like, oh,
it's like, not only do I love it, but I think 99% of people will not like it. Like, that's not a good place to be at. But yeah, so yeah, we're I mean, they'll get to it. They'll get to it. Let's move on from these dire Arena predictions and and focus on what's happening right now in the arena. Because Blizzard's moving on, right? The arena is getting more attention than it's ever gotten from Blizzard, and that's kind of been true for throughout the entirety of the last like 100 episodes of the Lightforge. Whatever direction Blizzard's pulling, whatever their latest like thought is that they want us to beta test, they're putting it out there. We're beta testing it. It's coming out with almost always mixed results. And then they improve upon it until it is mostly positive results, and then it becomes part of the game, and then we add the next thing. So this is now the early stages of the wild rotation test. The very first mid expansion rotation has just happened, Rise of the Mechs, and we get a little bonus with it because 2 cards from each class got buffed from Boomsday, and also Snip Snap got added, which is legendary, not too relevant in the arena, but just kind of an insane card. Definitely some destructive implications. But yeah. So things are very exciting right now in the arena. I know you've played some, I've played some. I'd like just one thing to kick this off. Holy crap, the speed of games now. Like,
Yes.
I have this thing in the back of my mind that's like, we used to have 4-hour streams, and we would get through 3 arenas on average. And then it became, we would have 4.5-hour streams, and half the time we can't get through 2 arenas. And
it was real hard, especially when I played like my priests.
oh god. I remember there was one coaching session where you couldn't finish. Like, you started the coaching session on time, and for 4.5 hours when you're trying to end the stream, you couldn't. You had to go on for another hour because it went 12.
Oh, that was an Archmage Arugal card draw mage. It was an attrition grinding mage. I forgot who I coached, but that person definitely got their money's worth. Yeah, it went 12-2 as well. So maximum amount of games, and there were a few times in which I think it was like turn 10, and I was just like, all right, we're playing the fatigue game now. It's like we're going for fatigue. That's it. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean, judging from the stream times.
Yeah. And now I think I've gotten through 3 arenas at least every single stream. And by every single stream, I mean both streams that we've had in the Rise of the Mechs meta. So things are definitely snappier now. What impressions have you had?
Okay. Yeah, things are definitely quite fast, right? And because they're fast, cards that you might have used to really highly value, something like Shovel Fist, right? Still good, not as good, right? Just not as good as it used to be. And you can certainly create decks that can stall. Like, if you are actually able to create a deck that can stall until Shovel Fist is like even better because the size of that thing and the value, like, because people don't have anything that big, right? So that is one of those themes that I'm seeing. Second is,
so one thing with Shovel Fist, before you go to number 2, one thing with Shovel Fist, win rates right now are really favoring, like, because we kept having this discussion, North Sea Kraken or Shovel Fist. And I think everyone ended up being like, Shovel Fist by a little bit, right? But basically, like, very similar. But North Sea Kraken's having a significant win rate advantage over Shovel Fist on HS Replay. And I'm wondering if that's because it's under bucketed. I can't remember in my drafts. I didn't have this impression that North Sea Kraken was under bucketed because I never ended up taking one. And I think if it was under bucketed, like, by any significant margin, I would have.
Well, Kraken can also go face.
Right. So the other thing that I'm wondering is if maybe just like the meta has gotten so fast that just that 4 damage that could possibly go face is really making a much bigger difference than anybody had expected. But I think if you're looking at HS Replay stats, there's also a third possible explanation. And again, we don't know what the explanation is, right? We're just guessing. Which is that the people who remember how good North Sea Kraken was are the people who are better at Arena, and they're the ones actually picking North Sea Kraken.
Oh, it could be.
Whereas the people who have no experience in this old school style of fast-paced meta and are probably losing more and having a more difficult time adjusting to the speed, to how important curve is, to how to get the freaking curve in the first place, are sticking with Burly Shovelfist because that's what they know, and everybody has told them that Shovelfist is going to be better than North Sea Kraken anyway.
I think that's part of it. And I think part of it is also the fact that. So, first of all, I see this comment in chat by Keldar, and I think it's so true that Shovelfist now maintains your advantage, but can't swing it now. And if you remember the previous meta, it's like games, they were often sort of still in question when going into turn 9, right? So a Shovelfist will turn the game. And now games are much less likely, even if you have a Shovelfist, and even if you survive that long, you do that, and they still have like 10 attack on the board, and then they just swing to your face, and the game's over, right? It's like, congratulations. It's like a white flag Shovelfist. But with Kraken, and I've seen this in a couple of streams, like today I just remember in Shady stream, he had a Kraken, and he had a chance to get lethal if he just drew his Kraken, right? It's one of those things where Kraken, sometimes it does like pretty similar things to the Shovelfist, but you have an option to go face with Kraken. You never have the option to go face with Shovelfist on the turn that comes out. So it's one of those things in which, for this meta, I think is quite important, right? Yeah, that's one of those things that I noticed. Did you want to say anything else about this topic?
No, just wanted to get the Shovelfist v Kraken point in. Go on to your number 2 point.
Number 2 point is the lack of responses, both on your opponent's side and on your side. Obviously, it's not like one side will have more than other. Although I know some members of Twitch chat will be like, "Oh, my opponent always has more than me." But yeah, we are in, once again, a meta that has necessitated that you go fast, right? So everyone's going fast. You got to go fast. But if you remember my Aggro Hunter guide, which I know has been a million years ago, but when you go fast, you can't have that much removal. Like, you just can't, right? If you have too much removal, you won't get out fast, and you will 100% die, right? But if you try to get out really fast and you have a lot of minions, you won't have a lot of responses as well. You don't want to draft too much responses, and just because of the cards that are out, there's not that much responses. Remember, we have a lot of early sets. It's only in the later sets where Blizzard was like, we don't like this Curvestone thing. We're going to give like lots of weird cards, flippy cards, AoEs, stall cards, a lot of this stuff. So you don't have a lot of them anyways. And a lot of times games are just decided by, it's like, okay, you have one removal and you used it. Well, that's it. And I've played a decent amount this week. I've watched a lot of streams as well. And the amount of times now that you will lose to that, like, that 6-2 minion, right? Or that, like, 5-1 minion, right? Like a Magma Ridge. The amount of times that you'll lose to that now is much higher than before. And it might make you, like, pretty sad. You're just like, wow, wait, like, are you serious? I can't remove this thing? And yeah, you can't remove that just because your removal options that you were used to in the previous meta are gone. Now, if you were in a coma for like the past 3 years and you came back, you're like, oh, I'm used to this. This is the way it used to be, right? This is the way it used to be. But we've been so used to the previous few expansions in which everyone has like a ton of removals and options and all of these like rush minions and stuff, where now you're just like, wait, okay, so I have one removal. I was lucky to draw it, and then I used it, and now I'm screwed.
I mean, that's why, like, you talk about Murloc Knight back in the day and how the big adjustment was for people to actually hold a removal for Murloc Knight. It's because it was hard to hold a removal. It's because you had so few removals that when you can get an advantage by using a removal to push, you really wanted to do that. But holding it is definitely the way to go.
It is. Okay, can I rant about the thing I ranted to you before we started this thing?
Yes. Go for it.
Okay. All right, guys. Okay, gotta clear. I feel like I'm ranting a lot.
I thought I was gonna rant more today, but I'm glad to see the ranting thrown to you for this episode.
No. Okay, so here is something that I really do not enjoy about this meta. All right, guys, something I really do not enjoy. We talk about rock, paper, scissors
Hmm.
mechanics on the Lightforge, right? And I want to tell you guys about the really annoying early rock, paper, scissors that I see in games these days. And that is the dynamic between one drops, two drops, and three drops. Now, if you remember, like half a year ago, what was the makeup of every single person's deck? It was like, you don't need ones, you don't really need twos. And then you start the game with either a 3-4 or a 4-4, right? And in fact, three drops were the strongest point of your deck. Like you had to shore up your threes, and you did. It was like really easy. If you didn't have enough strong three drops, you drafted wrong because like there was no way, right? So everyone sort of started off on like very similarly. It slowed down the game and everything, but everyone started off like pretty much on equal footing, and then the game begins and you make your decisions. One of the problems I see with the game right now is extremely early rock, paper, scissors mechanics, and it goes like this. There's a prevalence of, or not prevalence, but 2-1s are back in the meta, right? Whether it is tournament attendee or it's Clockwork Gnome or Morgan Infiltrator, which has
Hmm.
always been there. You have 2-1s, and that matches up really well against 3-2s, which 3-2s are good because it matches up really well against all the weak three drops in the meta right now. And that's been my experience. And also when I'm watching streams, uh, the three drop slot is really weak
It's
compared to
terrible.
what we've been used to.
You can't
Terrible,
even draft it. Like every single draft, by the way, if you want a drafting tip, make sure
unless
you
you're
have
paladin.
unless make sure
Unless
you
you're
have
paladin.
unless you have outdoors. Make sure you have 4 3 drops. But if you don't have 3 drops, we are this far back into the old school days. Just have extra 2 drops. You'll be fine. Like that's how weak 3 drops are these days. So
Yeah,
if you don't get enough 3 drops, don't like bend over backwards to like go down super in value to get a three if you don't want to. But make sure you have some extra 2 drops, or if your hero power functions, like 1 drops work even better. Um, yep, that's it.
yep. While 6 months ago, the only two drop that was like worth it was Gastropod, and the reason was because it
Hmm.
was essentially a three, right?
That was
Um,
such a silly card.
that was such a silly card. But yeah, so these days you have your 2-1, and then on turn two, it's really good up against the 3-2s, but really bad if they have 2-3s or like a flame juggler, right? And on turn three, you want the 3-2 that you put out there because that really contests so many three drops unless they have the Argent Horse Rider or like the Spring Rocket or one of
Hmm.
those.
Or
And
Hogsteed.
or Hogsteed, right? Yeah, exactly. Or their Hogsteed on turn two. And then what it does is like, okay, well, what choice do you really have here? Because the construction of your deck, which is drafting, a lot of times you don't get the choice between a 3-2 or a 2-3, right? If the choice is presented to you, it's like, hey, you want a Raptor or you want a Croc? And you chose, quote, wrong, right? You chose wrong during that instance.
Even if you had a choice, would you
Even if
take
you
rock or would you take paper? Or how about scissors, huh?
Right. Well, at that point, you can sort of like, see it's like, people are picking rock a little bit more. So, here,
But they're
like,
not. They're picking rock, paper, and scissors equally.
they are picking them equal. And the problem we have here is like, if you guys look at what is happening in your draft, it's like you're picking the 2-1s and you're not really thinking it's like, oh, it's because of, it's like,
Yep.
no, it's the best card and I need curve,
Yep.
right?
I need a 2 drop. This one's offered to me. I'm not giving up value to get the two. Take it.
The biggest thing pushing your decisions is your knowledge that it's a fast meta and you need curve. So you need, if it's a decent one, right, you take it. If it's a decent two, you take it. If it's a decent at all three and you don't have enough threes, you take it. And you especially take those. So you can't really plan, or you can't go into draft and it's like, oh, everyone's drafting 3-2s. It's like, gotta include the Argent Horse Rider. It's like, well, you might not get it, right? And of course, you probably take the Argent Horse Rider because it is just really good. So you end up having a lack of choices, but having your games decided by early rock, paper, scissors mechanics. And that to me is just like, I don't like that. You know, I don't. I like the speed that things are going because I like this sort of play, but I don't like these sort of things where it's like, oh, Argent Horse Rider into your 3/2. The you know, the Hogsteed into your 3/2. Oh, Flame Juggler into your 2/1. Up. Oh, that's it. So these really early rock paper scissors mechanics, I really am not a fan of.
It's a perfect kind of storm of all these elements coming back to make this early game rock paper scissors. If you had just swapped some other sets in, like I kept half these sets, it wouldn't be so much of a problem. And a lot of it really is like you look at Boomsday, right? That was the new set. That was the new set that was supposed to anchor some feeling of the new stuff that Blizzard had fixed the Curvestone stuff in. But Boomsday was very specifically not that set. Boomsday does not have 3/4s, right? Boomsday was very much the old school flavor, and that's what Blizzard built the set to do. So by letting Boomsday take the place of Witchwood, what you've ended up with is just the old school meta, and you get the old school meta with all of its warts, and then with more warts because of the new cards and the power levels of the new initiative deal 2 damage cards. You really just you fix it all by either getting rid of all these deal 2 damage cards at that early stage of the game from neutral, or you add 3/4s, like lots of them, or like really good 2/4s, right? 2/4s with an ability, or 2/5s, right? Just stuff like that just gets rid of the rock paper scissors, or really like makes it not as big of a problem as it is right now. And Blizzard can't do that because that's not how Blizzard works in the arena. Blizzard does not make arena specific cards in neutral to like fill in the meta. They're not like that much in the weeds. They just pick sets. And in this set, they picked it for the memes, right? They did not pick it to balance out a nice arena meta. They picked it for the mech memes. And so this is what you get. I want to say more things about 1-drops right now. If you guys look through 1-drops on HS Replay, the win rates of 1-drops are through the roof. These are not spectacular 1-drops. This is your frickin' Argent Squire, which is something like the 4th best neutral card in the game right now. Yes, Argent Squire has been underbucketed since forever, but not like hugely underbucketed. It's like 1.5 bucket underbucketed or like something like that, right? Like it's somewhat underbucketed. And in prior metas, it was similarly underbucketed, but it had never had that big of an impact on the game. But now, it has a ridiculously huge impact on the game. It had not really gotten better, but the early curve and that rock, paper, scissors is just that much different now. Like, having an Argent Squire changes the rock, paper, scissors system, right? Having a 2/1 puts you in control of the rock, paper, scissors, so that if you lose, you're at even, right? That's what you throw the card in there for. If you win the board for good. If you lose a card, but you don't lose the board. Your board, because you sacrifice the 1 mana card, your board is just kind of even if you lose. So all these 1-drops, and this is like a misprediction, right? Like, I didn't think 1-drops are going to be terribly important in this meta, given that there are not many good 1-drops outside of like Mecharoo, and that's just for mech synergies. As it turns out, I had forgotten just how freaking annoying and good Argent Squire was back in the day. And it was annoying and good, and now it's super underbucketed for what it was before, right? Before you take it over a 2-drop. Now it's bucketed with the 2-drops. So you also have Mecharoo filling the gap. Mecharoo's bucketed higher, but also has mech synergies. Still very high win rates. You just take Mecharoo. Your 2/1s, all viable picks. So I know we had not recommended picking 1-drop specifically. We were like, yeah, take them if you want. It's just kind of part of the game. But when you're in a game right now where a curve is so freaking important, you want to sacrifice a card for an additional 50% chance of getting the curve, and getting the board early. You just want to do that. And if it comes in later on, you're still pushing the tempo with it. It's not like it's still a favored strategy rather than a disfavored strategy later on, as it had been in prior metas. So like this was something that really we should have told you last week, but we did not. So here it is. There's some stats to back it up. There's some theory to back it up. Do it. You'll have a better time. The next thing I want to talk about. So we covered 1, 2. We'll call this the third point that I want to talk about is mechs. Right. This is all about mechs. This is the mech thing. Blizzard's pushing the mechs. And you see a lot of mechs. And you see a lot of mech synergies, because most mech synergies, as we said, were neutral. mechs are surprisingly not that annoying in the arena right now. Like, out of all the things that have changed in the arena in this rotation, mechs, and the whole point of Blizzard doing this, I think, is actually like an afterthought. Like, oh, you'll sometimes get some mech synergies, that's fine. Every now and then you'll face someone that has a ridiculous mech synergy, like that's all set up and they win. And that's fine. But they're not absolutely dominating the arena on the synergy side. And the key reason for that, I think, is that Mech Warper is bucketed really, really, really highly. So when you have Mech Warper bucketed really, really highly, and when you have basically no other like popular mechs that scale by number of mechs that you play, like mechs just buff mechs once, or they magnetize once. Like now you're just dealing with a very small amount of synergies. So I know a lot of people like are still like raving about the mechs because they're new, people are picking them. But like think next time you lose to a non-ridiculous mech deck, right? Like you get two things magnetized, or they pull off a +1/+1 on a mech, or like they get an extra spare part from Tinker. Just think about whether that actually lost you the game. And I think the chances of that actually having impacted your game is very low compared to the rock paper scissors that Merps was talking about before. Even though it
Yes.
feels worse because you're like, he just got something for free, right? Like that he shouldn't have. Um, so yeah.
Right here, yeah. Here's the thing that I think less people internalize this rock paper scissors thing that I'm talking about, and it's because I'm a nerd and I think about these things. When I play my games, like this immediately jumped out to me, the rock paper scissors thing, and it really bugged me. Right? I think with a lot of people, when they win or lose a game, they don't really think about it. But whenever you see a mech get magnetized, right? Whenever you see that on turn 5, they get like the super blessing of kings come out, magnetize, and trade into their minion. They're just like, oh, like stupid mechs. If it weren't for that, I would have won. And sometimes that is true. But I've watched streams before, and I watched their chat as well. And when a streamer, like let's say, loses to something like that, I'm just like, well, would they have lost if they played like 5 mana 5/5,
Right.
by itself? I'm like, yeah, they still would have. Like they
Mm-hmm.
were just behind, right?
Yeah.
And that is the effect of the meta and the effect of just sort of the streamer not curving out and everything. It's like, well, if they had just played a Stranglethorn Tiger, not even a Tiger, like it doesn't even need stealth, right? If they had just played like a 5 mana 5/5, I'm like, the same thing would have happened. Um,
Yep.
Knowing how the game turns out. So yeah, look, mechs are still powerful. You should still clear them if you have a choice. You're not giving up too much. But I do think people are making too big a deal out of it because the couple of days right after this came out, there was a Arena HS subreddit, and I know a lot of players were or they had a lot of like hubbub about it. They're just like, "Oh God, Max!" It's like I've lost so many times to Mechs. I'm like, I think you lost so many times because of your curve or because of your
And
play.
then
And
because mechs are all snowball synergies, right? They all require a mech on the board, and then another mech comes in and does something. Those
yeah,
synergies trigger more frequently when you're behind, and so you feel like you lose to them more, when really you're gonna lose more anyway, right?
yeah. So yes, look, I am not discounting games in which, first of all, yeah, add with this point, I want to make clear, there are some like crazy mech decks, right? But
Hmm.
then it's like in past metas we had crazy dragon decks, you know,
Crazy Jade decks.
crazy Jade decks, crazy dragon decks, crazy mech decks. Like those, you just toss your hands up and say is like, okay, well there was nothing I could do about that. In the other games in which you think it's like, it's just because of the mech, it's like, well, would like a normal 5 drop have
Hmm.
won them the game? It's like, yes, that pushed them ahead more than a 5 mana 5/5 normally would have. But like like I talked about before, you don't have responses in your hand, right? How are you going to get rid of that other 5/5? You weren't, and they were already ahead by like 4 tempo, so you lost. So if you don't like it, it's not. It's like don't blame the mech. Blame. It's like don't don't hate the player, hate the game, right?
Right,
It's like,
right.
and the mechs are the players. It's like this is sort of what the arena is.
Yeah, like don't hate the specific instrument by which it was the final shot, right? The final nail in the coffin that is you losing the board and losing the tempo. It could have been a
Yes.
mech synergy. It could have been an Inspire synergy. It could have been any other snowball mechanic, like, I don't know, a Sea Giant, a Frostwolf Warlord. Like, the list goes on and on, right? It could have been any of those things, and it just so happened that this one was a mech. Like they're all under that same umbrella of win more. And this brings back the super age old adage that we stopped hearing about maybe I want to say 2 years ago whenever Ungoro came out, we stopped saying it because it stopped being as true. But before Ungoro, everyone complained about win more. They're like, oh, but this card is just win more, so it's not that good, right? This card is just one more, like, and so like it seems like it's that good, but it's not that good. And I feel like the community had kind of absorbed that, and they were like saying it a lot, and like whenever someone brings something up, they would like, there would be a lot of people on the but that's just win more kind of like train, that we actually had to fight back against it. And we're like, well, sometimes win more is very useful, right? Because sometimes shutting down that 20% chance your opponent was going to come back is kind of useful. And then all that went out the window when the Ungoro meta started, and it's not win more or whatever. It's just kind of huge swings everywhere. But now we're back, and we don't have the wisdom of win more being a thing anymore because we've forgotten it as a community because it was a long time ago. But we're back in the old meta, and so the old wisdoms should come back, which is that win more cards are not as amazing as they seem. They're certainly useful. They're not just like, oh, that's just one more, we can't play it. Because at some point in Classic, I don't know who was really like a proponent for this. Maybe it was Trump or someone. But there was this like general feeling that like if a card was win more, you might as well just have a curve card. And I'm like, yeah, it depends on how win more it is, right? Like, it had gotten to the point where some very good cards were deemed not to like pickable. Like Bloodlust was like a never pick, because it was win more. And it's like, wow, what are your totems doing without the bloodlust, right? It's not win more, it's a win condition. But yeah, anyway, my point is, we've totally lost this idea that win more is not as good as the actual thing that happens after you have the board and then play the win more card. And we need to get back a little to that. For the veterans here who have been around for like more than like 2.5 years, they know. But if you've been around in the Hearthstone or the Hearthstone Arena community only in the last like 2.5 years, you've never like really heard of this as like an age old like adage that is just common wisdom, and it is back in the day. So, and we're back in the day now. We are so back in the day now. This meta, like, I get pangs of very not nostalgia, like PTSD from just playing this game right now, and not because of specific cards, just because of the feel of every game.
Yeah. It's not great. And look. Whenever we say this, I feel like I always have to mention this because I think people take it the wrong way, and I always have to say skill still matters a ton, right?
Oh yeah.
You're still going to see a lot of familiar faces on the leaderboards. If you go watch your favorite streamers, they will still do really, really, really well, right? But the feel of the game is very different, and you need to internalize all of this, and also you need to stop just getting really pissed off at mechs because it's not helping you. It really isn't. So if you were sort of okay, or not okay, but like if you sort of just disregarded the losses to dragons, right, and losses to jades that you used to have, then you should discount this as well. Now, if you complain incessantly about dragons and jades as well, I can't stop you there. But if you suddenly think it's different this time, it's like, oh, dragons, that was sort of a niche thing, but mechs, no. It's not.
Because the mech swings are so much smaller is the thing, right? Like, what's the difference between magnetized and non-magnetized? Like, imagine if I had a 5/5 for 5 mana. What would the Lightforge rating be? I don't know, 85? What would the Lightforge rating be for a 5 mana buff 5/5? I don't know, a 140? Like, that's a pretty big difference, right? Yeah, sure. You got like 60 points worth of value from like hitting the magnetic thing, right? But what's 60 points? That's like +1/+1. That's why there's another card that is a mech that literally gives another mech +1/+1. Because they're generally vaguely equivalent values.
Yeah.
And you don't think about
Meanwhile,
it that way. You just think like, oh my god, it got magnetized. It's like, I don't know. He played 5 mana, got 10 stats, right? Like, sure, the stats had initiative, but they're like tied to the attack of another creature that already had initiative. So it's like
yeah,
half initiative. Like, there's stuff happening.
right. Meanwhile, for stuff like dragons, it's like, oh, play a pit fighter and discover
Oh
a
my
card from your
god,
opponent's deck. Stuff like that, stupid things. But
dragons.
anyways, so hopefully you guys can go into games with a clear head, and if there's any anger to this, just be angry at Blizzard for creating this sort of like meta, right? Don't be angry at the mechs.
I think Blizzard kind
They're
of did
just
it on
trying their best,
purpose,
man.
not just to
Yeah,
like do the mech thing, but also to like just remind everybody of how great of a job they've done since TGT and GBG with the sets and the overall
they have.
meta. And having been in it, because memories are short, right? Like we don't really remember what we were doing 3 years ago, 4 years ago. We have like some memories of it, and sometimes we talk nostalgically about how great things were back then in certain areas. But if you had any like doubt whether you're a new player who didn't see those metas, or you like us just like forgot some of the like really bad stuff, not forgot, but like the impact was changed in your head. The metas back then were a lot more swingy. Curvestone was a lot bigger of a problem and like a real problem. And it was something that was so much of a problem that Blizzard took pains to specifically fix it over a series of expansions after that. And yeah, sure, this meta is actually worse than it's ever been because of this rock paper scissor thing, which did not exist, by the way, back then because there was no
No,
Hogsteed, there was no whatever the 2/1 that deals 2 damage thing is, and there was just Argent Horse Rider. And
yeah, you didn't
Argent,
have Spring Rocket.
yeah, there wasn't Stream Rocket. It was just Argent Horse Rider, and Argent Horse Rider didn't even come in until TGT. And so one card does not, and Hogsteed was not super underbucketed. There wasn't a concept, right, of
Yeah,
underbucketing back then. So yes, the rock paper scissors in the early game of Curvestone is actually the worst it's ever been. So it's not like Blizzard just took us back; they made it worse.
yeah, yeah, and it's a perfect storm kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, so this is where we are at right now, and you guys feel free to tweet at us, share your opinions about whether you think that this is true. But I've paid pretty close attention to this because I'm a nerd, and also I just think about this stuff. But in my games, I noticed it immediately, and then I started watching streams, and I'm watching. It's like, okay, how do people draft, and afterwards how games are turning out, and games are pretty like it's decided very early on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the game isn't over, but if there were, and if you guys watch sports, you know what I mean. In sports, they'll track its like team's percent chance to win, right, at that exact moment. This the favoritism towards one player after like turn 2 or turn 3 is so much higher now than it used to be, right? And certainly the meta that I was talking about, where everyone just like had 3/4s and 4/4s, it was like, okay, well, that it like didn't change at all, right? You play your 3/4, they play the 3/4, you go on your way. But right now, because of the 2/1 versus 3/2 versus 2/3 versus like the horse riders and the spring rockets, you get these wild fluctuations and swings, and whenever like another good player, another streamer, it's like wins, sometimes they win because of this, and whenever they lose, sometimes they lose because of it. Now they're obviously going to be better at recovering, right? There are some games in which they start off really poorly, not because of their bad play, but because of this, and they fight back through good
Yeah.
decision making.
And they're also going to be better at keeping the advantage and not losing it once they have the
Right.
advantage.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just like, yeah, it looks a lot better slash worse for one player after turn 2 or turn 3 than in previous metas,
Yep.
right? So
And
this is
up
what
to
I
that
mean.
point, there has been zero skill involved.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, okay, it's turn 2. do I play my 3/2? Yeah, of course I play my 3/2. And it's like, and if they have the horse rider, I guess they have the horse rider. That's the thing. And on turn one, it's like, do I play my tournament attendee? It's like, well, yeah, why did I draft it then? Right? So you play it, and then if they have the flame juggler, you're like, well, that sucks. So
Flame
there's no
Juggler, by
choice
the
there.
way, one of the highest win rate cards in this meta. Unfortunately, they did not bucket it high enough. They bucketed it high. I don't blame them for putting it. Oh, one more thing. This just kind of got lost in all of it, and it's really good thing we're not talking about it. But like, kudos to Blizzard. Most of these buckets are great. I
Most,
actually,
yeah,
I
yeah.
actually have very little to complain about bucketing wise. Which is, one, they probably had a lot of stats from this stuff. This is all old cards coming in, none of the new cards. But hey, it was what do you call it, like a softball, but they knocked it out of the park, I think. Um, so good on that. And yeah, some of the stuff are like a little bit misbucketed, and you'll see it like have an effect, and they'll presumably fix it in a, I want to say like a few days from now. And
Maybe.
Flame Juggler is going to be one of them where it's just they bucketed it high, but it's turning out real good. Uh, yeah. One more thing that we want to say, like I know there was some pushback when we said Fell Reaver was the best card, and it has the highest win rate right now outside of
Wow, it does?
outside of
I was surprised.
Recombobulator. I have no idea why Recombobulator has the highest win rate. Don't ask me to justify that. But Fell Reaver has the second highest out of
Wow.
all neutral non-legendary cards.
Actually, no, that totally makes sense. Because no, that makes a ton of sense. Or no, not the recombobulator.
Okay, I'm like,
Yeah,
enlighten me.
no, the Fell Reaper. Because I mean, look, the card by itself obviously is super duper extremely good and
Guaranteed to be under bucketed.
guaranteed to be under bucketed, and also quote casual players or players that don't know the power of Fell Reaper aren't taking
Oh,
it,
they're
right?
also not going to take it. That's true.
Yeah, that's the thing. So with
Yeah,
that, I'm
yeah.
like,
So it's
I'm so
statistically
not
skewed
surprised.
too for like HS
It's
replay
so
stats.
skewed. It's
Yeah.
skewed in so many ways,
Okay,
right?
that's
So
fair.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah. Also, just some general, like we'll have bucketing info. I don't know, like Arena Drafts is gathering bucketing info, and we'll probably have it sometime next week. But then Blizzard's gonna rebucket. What I'm really hoping for is that next week when Blizzard does its first rebucketing slash micro adjust, they just tell us the freaking buckets like they did in the last rotation. That would be because theirs is going to be one more accurate and two easier. But if they don't, we will go take Arena Drafts data and update the Lightforge tier list with that. So they will not be all these cards will not be unbucketed for long, one way or the other. But we're gonna wait for Blizzard on this, and you know, hopefully they'll continue what they've done so far and communicate the bucket information to us. Um, but until then, some things like Microtech controller still under bucketed. It used to be under bucketed. It's still under bucketed. They moved freaking replicating menace, which used to be hugely under bucketed. But I guess now they're like, oh, magnetic mechs, we're moving it up now. So now it's actually kind of decently bucketed. So you're no longer getting a ton of value out of replicating menace for the under buckets as you did back in the Boomsday meta. Pilot as Shredder is a little under bucketed still. I don't know how that happened because it was a ridiculous kind of card. But they did not bucket it at the very top, and it should be at the very top, and so it's under bucketed.
Yeah, and you also see tons of shredders. I see
Yes,
tons of shredders.
yes, because everyone like remembers how great they were, and they pick it, and it is that great. What do you know? And so that's probably going to move up a bucket, a half bucket, or a bucket when Blizzard rebuckets it. But for now, that's a good place to get value. Yeah. There's probably more stuff later, but I just don't know the buckets of all these to like make bucketing recommendations. Mech Warper, like I mentioned before, is very over bucketed, and it's probably done on purpose. And it's also probably done because there will always be people making meme mech decks who will actually get the value and take Mech Warper. So do not take Mech Warpers unless your entire deck is very entirely geared towards mechs. In which case, it still functions just fine, right? So I'm not saying it's like a bad bucket to put this card in. I like it there. It's actually helping keep mechs under control. But I'm saying you as the player should not take Mech Warper unless you already have an extremely, extremely mech deck.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like you are like if you're taking it second pick, you're probably giving up
Yeah.
not like an extreme amount of value, but you're probably giving up like some value for it.
Mm,
And you shouldn't do that so early on, right? Now, if it's like pick 20 and you have mechs, or if you just need the two, right?
yeah,
If you
yeah.
just
Oh, if you
need the
just need
two
a
as
two
well,
drop, definitely take
sure.
it because it's a two drop, right?
Yeah. So it's not the most egregious. There were some points in Hearthstone history where you're just where it's like, okay, you are like going down in value significantly. So please do not take it. Here it's just don't do
Think,
it. I typically
like
don't
think
do
a
it.
lot before you take it.
Yeah, yeah. But if you do take it, it's like, okay. You probably need it. Like you can justify it like
Yeah.
fairly easily. Whereas there were some picks in which it's like, man, you really got to justify that. Let's hear like your 5 reasons for taking that card.
I
With
mean,
Mech Warp, it's like, okay, you really need it too,
yeah.
sure. Or you actually have like 7 mechs. You're like, oh wow, okay.
All right. Well, I think that's a good coverage of what's going on in the current meta. I'll make one more point about Rogue specifically because Rogue used to suck. Not it didn't really suck. It was still always like kind of decent in a good player's hands, but its win rates were pretty low. And Rogue is really high up now. They got a bunch of good cards. They lost a bunch of good cards too. But most importantly for Rogue, this meta, like if you ever want to think about what wins games in this meta, just think about what rogues do. Because the rogue win rate has skyrocketed from like just HS replay players, so not even just like the top players. But that's because the entire rogue set is all about making sure you don't have the board in the early game. You got the Buccaneer, you have the Undercity Valiants, you have the evil miscreants and like the Goblin Auto Barbers, and then you have a whole bunch of hard removals at that. You have a bunch of reach and whatever, but you still have your normal cards like Eviscerate, Backstab, SI7, right? All that good stuff. Tinkers is a ridiculous card if you're ahead on the board. Um, so yeah, um, it's all turning up Rogue for this meta. So it's a kind of a good thing that that they nerf Rogue so hard in the prior meta, unnecessarily. Obviously, that was a pretty bad nerf to live with for 3 weeks of gameplay. But now it means Rogue is actually starting at a not super OP level, like it would have started if they had actually balanced Rogue appropriately for the prior meta. And so yeah, so if you're trying to visualize what matters to winning games, just think what do rogues do in the first 3-4 turns, and that is absolutely dominate the board. Make sure you're not on it. Make sure they have at least one thing on it, and then they push after that. That is the general winning strategy in this meta, and other classes can't pull it off as well. But if you draft in a way to make these other classes pull it off similarly, you'll get similar results. Just and or if you're trying to rely on that strategy, I don't know what you can do. There's like it's really like impossible to defend against Rogue when they try to do this.
Yeah. All right. That's sort of the meta. Wow, this has been like a quick hour and a half.
Yeah, yeah. I thought we'd go on for 2 hours, but I think we're set here. This is a good overview of Rise of the Mechs. We discussed the future of Hearthstone, the past of Hearthstone. I think it's nice to tie it all together. Any final thoughts before we end our 200th Lightforge?
No, and honestly, I when we started, I never thought we'd get to 200. Not because I have like no faith in us. It was just something that I didn't think would happen. But now that we're here, I'm just like, all right, I think it's I think this game has a solid future. I think we'll definitely be around to see it to the end
To
whenever
the
that
bitter
may.
end. You say that, but then you realize WoW is still going, and so the bitter end may be like we may be old men at that point rather than just old for gamers.
Yeah, well, in Lightforge 600, we'll be talking about, they're coming out with classic Hearthstone. It's like just the classic and
Oh
basic cards, a
god,
Hall of Fame cards, and
unnerfed.
only them. I know, unnerfed. Oh my gosh. 2-1 Leper Gnome, 2-1 Abusive Sergeant. Oof.
Mm-mm.
3-2 Knife Jugglers. Oh god.
Oh, knife jugglers. Jeez, that was such a I don't know
Yeah.
who allowed that to exist.
5 mana Blizzard, 8 mana Pyro, 8 mana
Okay,
Mind Control.
8 mana Pyro on Mind Control, I can see. All right,
I
like
could
I
see
can
that.
justify that in many ways. 5 mana Blizzard, I can justify in many ways. All the free stuff that turned out problematic, I can justify what their thought process was. Leopardome, I can even justify their thought process. Like the Knife Juggler, which was one of the latest nerfs too, out of all of those. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
I know. Also, Power Overwhelming and 0 mana Soulfire. Remember those?
oh my god, 0 mana so far. I do remember that.
0 mana Soulfire plus Power Overwhelming. I was like, wow, holy shit, Warlock was busted.
The best
But
part,
then everything was busted.
the best part about 0 mana Soulfire was that 3 mana Shadow Bolt existed at the same time, which you can't go face. That was 3 mana, and you're just like, all right. I mean, I guess one's just a better card than the other.
Yeah. Anyways, all right. So that's where we are. Pretty good. Pretty good. We'll see. We'll see what the 300th Lightforge will bring. Thank you guys for listening. All right. Thank you for making the community what it is. I know that during Lightforge 100, we spent the end thanking some of the other streamers that has helped us. I don't want to get too sappy. So for this one, I just want to thank everyone out there within the arena community because you guys make the game. You guys really do make the game. And if no one were to listen to this, I don't think we would make it. I'm assuming that. I have no idea. We could just be crazy enough. We could be the two
I
people.
talk into the void all the time.
I know you do. We could be the two people in the apocalypse, which has a radio station with like everyone dead, and we still do it. But it is important to have this community, right? Like I said before, games are elevated by the players, and this is kind of it. Like we try to put out content so that to foster discussion and to elevate the game. But we could never do as much as the rest of the community does, whether streamers or people that just put out articles, do analyses, do the tireless work of figuring out what the buckets are, right? Coming out with certain software, Twitch for organizing tournaments.
Yeah, and just all the people who are like commenting on Arena HS and posting questions and like
challenging us.
Talking on chat. Like I love being challenged. It may not seem so at the time that I am being challenged that I like being challenged, but I definitely do, or I wouldn't put myself out there like this, right? Like it's you get to the truth, right? I strongly believe in that the strong presentation of all the sides allows the truth to become more clear.
Very true.
Okay. That's it for today. Lightforge 200 is in the books. Until next time, this is Adwicta.
This is Merps. See you at 300, guys.